a millionaire CEO, needed a ride. The single mother who helped him shocked him on a cold November evening when Richard Caldwell's luxury car broke down on a deserted highway. He never imagined that the rusted minivan pulling over to help would change his life forever. Inside was Maria Santos, a single mother working 3 jobs, with her 8-year-old daughter sleeping in the back seat. What happened next would challenge everything he believed about success, sacrifice, and what truly matters in life. This is a story of an unexpected encounter that proved kindness has no price tag and that sometimes the people who have the least give the most. Richard Caldwell sat in his disabled Mercedes, the leather seat cold beneath him as the November wind rattled the windows. The dashboard displayed a warning he had never seen before: complete engine failure. His phone showed no signal. The highway stretched empty in both directions, a ribbon of asphalt disappearing into the gathering darkness. He was 2 hours from the city, returning from a corporate acquisition meeting that had run late. At 52 years old, Richard was used to control. He controlled boardrooms, controlled million-dollar deals, controlled the lives of 3,000 employees across his tech company empire. But he could not control this moment. Richard stepped out of the car, his Italian leather shoes crunching on the gravel shoulder. The cold bit through his tailored suit. He walked a few steps, holding his phone high, searching for even a single bar of service. Nothing. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, beautiful and indifferent to his situation. 20 minutes passed, then 30. A few cars drove by without slowing. Richard watched their taillights disappear, red dots swallowed by the distance. He began to feel something unfamiliar, vulnerability. Then he saw headlights approaching from behind, moving slower than the others. An old silver minivan, its paint faded and scratched, pulled onto the shoulder 50 feet behind him. The vehicle shuddered as it came to a stop, and Richard heard the engine knock and rattle even from where he stood. The driver's door opened, and a woman stepped out. She was petite, maybe in her early 30s, wearing a faded blue medical scrub top and jeans. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and exhaustion showed in the way she moved. But her eyes, even from a distance, held something Richard recognized from his own mirror in younger days: determination. "Are you okay?" she called out, her voice carrying a slight accent that softened the edges of her words. Richard straightened, his business persona returning automatically. "Car trouble. Engine failure. Do you have cell service?" The woman walked closer, and Richard noticed the caution in her approach. She checked her phone and shook her head. "No service out here until you get closer to town. That's about 15 miles east." She looked at his Mercedes, then back at him. "I can give you a ride if you need one." Richard hesitated. The minivan looked like it might not make another 1,000 miles. Through the rear window, he could see a child's car seat and what appeared to be a small figure sleeping. "I don't want to impose, especially with your child." "It's no imposition," the woman said simply. "Nobody should be stranded out here at night. I'm Maria, by the way, Maria Santos." Richard Caldwell. He extended his hand, and her handshake was firm despite her small frame. "Lock up your car, Mr. Caldwell. We'll get you to a phone in town." Richard retrieved his briefcase and locked the Mercedes, wondering if he would see it again in one piece. As he approached the minivan, he noticed the rear bumper was held on with wire, and one taillight was covered with red tape, but it was clean inside despite its age, with a rosary hanging from the rearview mirror and the child's drawing taped to the dashboard. In the back seat, a little girl around 8 years old stirred as he opened the passenger door. She had her mother's dark hair and delicate features. "Mama?" she said sleepily. "It's okay, Mija. We're just helping someone. Go back to sleep." Richard settled into the passenger seat, which was worn but clean. The minivan smelled faintly of vanilla air freshener and French fries. As Maria started the engine, it took 3 tries. He noticed her hands. They were small and showed the wear of hard work. The nails cut short and practical. "Thank you for stopping," Richard said as they pulled back onto the highway. Most people didn't. Maria glanced at him briefly before returning her eyes to the road. "Most people are scared these days. I understand that. But I was taught that when someone needs help, you help if you can. Simple as that. That's kind of you." Richard studied her profile in the dashboard lights, especially this late. "Were you coming from work?" "Yes, I'm a nursing assistant at Mercy General. Just finished a double shift." She said it matter-of-factly, without complaint. A double shift, that must be exhausting. Maria smiled, just a little. It is what it is. My daughter Emma and I, we do what we need to do. In the back seat, Emma had indeed fallen back asleep, her head resting against a pillow wedged between the car seat and the window. Richard noticed a small blanket covering her, handmade with mismatched patches. As they drove through the darkness, the minivan's engine laboring on the hills, Richard Caldwell found himself in unfamiliar territory, dependent on the kindness of a stranger. A woman who probably earned in a month what he spent on a single dinner, and something about that realization settled uncomfortably in his chest. The minivan climbed a long hill, the engine straining, and Maria downshifted with practiced ease. Richard noticed the fuel gauge hovering near empty, and a small worry crossed his mind that he quickly dismissed. They passed a weathered billboard advertising a truck stop ahead. 5 miles. "So what brings you out on this highway so late, Mr. Caldwell?" Maria asked, her voice quiet to not wake Emma. "A business meeting." It ran longer than expected. Richard paused, then added, "I should have checked my car before leaving. Rookie mistake." "We all make mistakes." Maria's response held no judgment. "The important thing is we learn from them." Richard found himself curious about this woman who spoke with such simple wisdom. "How long have you been a nursing assistant?" 5 years. Since Emma was 3. Maria's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. "After my husband died, I needed work that had steady hours and benefits. Nursing assistant certification was something I could get quickly. I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you." Maria's voice remained steady. "David was a good man. Construction accident. One day he went to work, and he didn't come home. It was hard on Emma. She was so young." Richard sat with that information, trying to imagine losing everything overnight, being left alone with a small child. He had been divorced twice, both times walking away with his fortune intact, barely a disruption to his life. That must have been incredibly difficult. "The first year was the hardest," Maria admitted, "but you find strength you didn't know you had. For Emma, I would do anything. She's my whole world." They passed the truck stop, its lights blazing in the darkness. Richard saw Maria glance at it, then keep driving. "Did you need to stop?" he asked. "No, we're okay. The next town is better, closer for you to get help." Richard suspected she was avoiding the truck stop to save money on gas, despite her tank being low. The thought bothered him more than it should. "How many jobs do you work, Maria?" She was quiet for a moment. "Right now, 3. The nursing assistant position at the hospital is full-time. Then, I clean offices 3 evenings a week. After Emma goes to bed, my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, watches her. And on weekends, I work at a diner, breakfast shift. Emma comes with me and does homework in a booth. 3 jobs." Richard's mind did the math. "When do you sleep?" Maria laughed softly, and it was a beautiful sound. Genuine despite her exhaustion. "Sleep is overrated, Mr. Caldwell. Besides, Emma starts 4th grade next year, and the good elementary school requires us to live in a different district. I'm saving for first and last month's rent for an apartment there. It's expensive, but the school has a gifted program. Emma is very smart. She deserves every opportunity." Richard looked back at the sleeping child. In the dim light, he could see a workbook on the seat beside her, filled with math problems. "She must be very proud of you. I hope one day she understands why I worked so hard. Right now, she just knows Mama is always tired." There was a note of sadness in Maria's voice. "She doesn't complain, though. Never. She's better than I deserve." "I doubt that," Richard said quietly. They drove in silence for a while, the white lines on the road ticking past rhythmically. Richard found himself thinking about his own children from his first marriage, a son and daughter, both adults now, both who rarely called unless they needed money. When had he last had a real conversation with either of them? When had he last asked about their lives, not their stock portfolios? "Can I ask you something, Mr. Caldwell?" Maria's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "Of course. What do you do?" "For work. I run a technology company. We develop software for healthcare systems, actually. Patient management, records, that sort of thing." Maria's eyebrows raised. "Really? We use software like that at the hospital." It's very helpful, though sometimes confusing. Richard felt a strange pride in that. His company's software was in hundreds of hospitals. Which system does Mercy General use? Meditrack, I think it's called. Richard sat forward slightly. That's one of ours. My company developed that 7 years ago. Small world, Maria said, smiling. Well, thank you then. It makes our job easier mostly, though I wish the scheduling system was better. It's hard to request time off. Richard made a mental note about the scheduling module. When had he last actually asked frontline workers about the software? He approved features based on what hospital administrators wanted, not what the people using it every day needed. I'll look into that, he said, and meant it. Oh, I didn't mean to complain, Maria said quickly. I'm grateful to have the job. No, you're right to mention it. Feedback from actual users is valuable. The lights of a small town began to appear ahead, aglow against the dark sky. Maria's minivan seemed to sense the end of the journey and made a particularly loud knocking sound. She patted the dashboard affectionately. Just a little further, old friend. How long have you had this vehicle? Richard asked. 8 years. It was used when I bought it, but it's been good to us. Needs some work now, but that'll have to wait until after we move. She said it without self-pity, just stating facts. As they entered the town, a small place with a main street of shops, most closed for the night, Maria drove directly to a well-lit gas station with a repair shop attached. They'll have a phone you can use, and probably a tow truck service. She pulled up to the front and put the minivan in park. The sudden silence when the engine stopped was profound. In the back seat, Emma stirred but didn't wake. Richard reached for his briefcase. Maria, I can't thank you enough. You went out of your way. It was on my way, she lied kindly. Richard knew from the highway signs that she had driven past her exit 5 miles back. He opened his wallet and pulled out several $100 bills. Please, for your gas and time. Maria's hand came up gently but firmly. No, Mr. Caldwell. I didn't help you for money. I helped you because it was the right thing to do. Her dark eyes met his, and Richard saw dignity there that money could never buy. Then at least let me. You can pay it forward, Maria interrupted softly. Next time you see someone who needs help, you help them. That's payment enough. Richard slowly put his wallet away, feeling something shift inside his chest. When was the last time someone had refused his money? When was the last time someone had helped him without expecting anything in return? You're remarkable, Maria Santos. She blushed slightly. I'm just a mother doing her best, Mr. Caldwell. Nothing remarkable about that. She glanced back at Emma. I should get her home. School tomorrow. Richard opened the door but hesitated. May I have your contact information? I'd like to stay in touch. Make sure you got home safely. Maria looked surprised but reached into the center console and pulled out a small notepad. She wrote down a phone number and an email address in careful handwriting and tore off the page. That's my cell. I don't always answer during the day, but I check messages. Richard took the paper and carefully placed it in his wallet. Thank you, Maria, for everything. You're welcome. Good luck with your car, Mr. Caldwell. Richard stood on the pavement and watched as the old minivan pulled away, its one taped taillight glowing red in the darkness. He watched until it disappeared around a corner, and even then he stood there for a long moment, holding a piece of paper with a phone number and feeling like something important had just happened, though he couldn't quite name what it was. Behind him, the gas station attendant called out, asking if he needed help. Richard turned, pulled out his phone. Service had returned and began making calls, but his mind was elsewhere, in an old minivan with a tired woman and her sleeping daughter, driving toward a home he had never seen but could somehow imagine perfectly. 3 days later, Richard Caldwell sat in his corner office on the 42nd floor, the city sprawling beneath him like a circuit board of light in motion. His Mercedes had been repaired, a sensor failure easily fixed. His life had returned to normal. But something had changed. He couldn't stop thinking about Maria Santos, not in a romantic way. Richard was self-aware enough to recognize that, but in a way that had begun to unsettle his carefully constructed worldview. A woman working 3 jobs, raising a daughter alone, refusing money that would have meant nothing to him but everything to her. Why? The question had kept him awake for 2 nights. Richard picked up his phone and dialed his head of human resources. Jennifer, I need you to pull some information for me, discreetly. Of course, Richard. What do you need? I want to know about the working conditions at Mercy General Hospital, specifically for nursing assistants. Wages, benefits, scheduling policies, everything. Is this for a new contract proposal? Just research, Richard said. And Jennifer? I also want to know if we have any programs for supporting single parents in the hospitals that use our software. There was a pause. We don't, that I'm aware of. Is this a new initiative? Maybe. Just get me the information. Richard hung up and turned to his computer. He had tried to put the encounter behind him, to file it away as an interesting story to tell at dinner parties, but Maria's face kept appearing in his mind, the exhaustion, the quiet strength, the gentle way she had refused his money. He opened a new browser window and began searching. Mercy General Hospital, nursing assistant positions, cost of living in the area, school districts and rental prices. The numbers that emerged painted a picture that troubled him deeply. A nursing assistant at Mercy General made roughly $32,000 a year. After taxes, that was about $2,000 a month. He found rental listings for two-bedroom apartments in the better school district, the one Maria mentioned, starting at $1,400 a month. That left $600 for food, utilities, transportation, insurance, clothing, medical care, and everything else a parent and child needed. Impossible. Unless you worked 3 jobs. Richard sat back in his leather chair, staring at the numbers. He spent more on wine in a year than Maria earned from full-time work. The thought made him physically uncomfortable. His phone buzzed. A text from Jennifer. Preliminary info on Mercy General attached. Some concerning patterns in scheduling and turnover rates. More detailed report by end of day? Richard opened the attachment and began reading. What he found made his jaw tighten. Nursing assistants at Mercy General and most hospitals using his company's software were routinely scheduled for mandatory overtime with less than 24 hours notice. The scheduling system, the one Maria had gently criticized, made it nearly impossible for workers to request consistent time off. Turnover was high, burnout was epidemic, and exit interviews repeatedly mentioned inflexible scheduling and work-life balance as reasons for leaving. Richard had approved that scheduling system himself 3 years ago. The hospital administrators loved it because it maximized coverage and minimized labor costs. He had never once asked what the nursing assistants thought of it. He picked up his phone again and called Maria's number. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. Her voice, warm and slightly rushed. "Hi, this is Maria. I can't answer right now, but please leave a message and I'll call you back. If this is about Emma's school, please call the emergency contact instead. Thank you." Richard hesitated, then spoke. "Maria, this is Richard Caldwell, the man you helped on the highway. I wanted to check in, make sure you made it home safely that night. I'd like to speak with you again if you have time. Please call me back when you can." He left his direct number and hung up. The rest of the day passed in meetings and conference calls, but Richard's mind was elsewhere. He kept checking his phone. No return call. That evening, sitting in his penthouse apartment with its view of the city lights, Richard made a decision. He opened his laptop and began drafting an email to his executive team. Subject: New Initiative. Frontline Workers Support Program Team. I want to develop a comprehensive program to support the frontline workers in facilities using our software. This should include schedule flexibility tools, childcare assistance, and emergency financial support for single parents and others facing hardship. I want a proposal on my desk in 2 weeks. Budget is not a primary concern. Quality of life for these workers is. R. Caldwell. He sent it, then sat staring at the screen. It felt right, but also insufficient. A program was abstract. Maria was real. His phone rang, an unknown number. Richard answered immediately. "Mr. Caldwell, it's Maria Santos. I'm so sorry I missed your call. I was at work." Relief flooded through him. "Maria, no apology necessary. I just wanted to make sure you got home safely that night. And I wanted to thank you again." "We got home just fine," Maria said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. "Emma asked about the nice man in the suit the next morning. She thought maybe you were a prince from her storybooks." Richard laughed. "Definitely not a prince. Just a businessman who got very lucky that you drove by. I was happy to help." There was a pause, then Maria's voice came back, more hesitant. "Mr. Caldwell, can I ask why you really called?" Richard took a breath. I've been thinking about our conversation, about your work, your situation. I'd like to help Maria, not as charity, but as, I'm not sure what, but I want to help. The silence on the other end stretched long enough that Richard worried the call had dropped. Mr. Caldwell, Maria finally said, her voice gentle but firm. That's very kind, but I don't need help. Emma and I are doing fine. We have what we need. But 3 jobs is what I choose to do for my daughter's future. Maria interrupted quietly. I appreciate your concern, I really do. But we're okay. Richard heard the pride in her voice, the same pride that had made her refuse money 3 nights ago. He respected it, even as it frustrated him. I understand. But Maria, if you ever do need anything, please call me. No strings attached. Just one human being to another. Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. That means a lot. After they hung up, Richard sat in the darkness of his apartment, the city glittering below like stars brought to earth. He thought about pride and dignity, about a woman who had everything to gain and nothing to lose by accepting help, but who refused because she had something Richard had lost somewhere along the way. The belief that how you live matters more than what you have. He looked at the email he had sent to his team, and it suddenly felt inadequate. Programs and policies were good, but they were also easy. They let him feel like he was helping while keeping everyone at arm's length, keeping their struggles abstract. Richard Caldwell had built an empire by seeing opportunities others missed. Now, looking at the phone in his hand with Maria's number saved, he saw a different kind of opportunity to learn from someone who had nothing materially, but everything that mattered. He just had to figure out how to do it without insulting her pride or crossing boundaries. And for a man used to solving problems with money and power, that was an entirely new challenge. 2 weeks passed. Richard had launched his frontline worker support program with more energy than he had brought to any project in years. He personally visited 3 hospitals, including Mercy General, speaking with nursing assistants, janitors, cafeteria workers. The conversations changed him. Then, on a Tuesday evening, his phone rang. Maria's number. Maria? He answered immediately. Mr. Caldwell. Her voice was tight, strained. I'm sorry to call. I know it's late, and I told you I didn't need help, but She took a shaky breath, and Richard realized she was crying. I don't know who else to call. Richard was already grabbing his coat. What happened? Where are you? Emma collapsed at school today. They brought her to Mercy General. The doctors say she has a severe kidney infection. She needs to be hospitalized for at least the week, maybe more, with IV antibiotics. Maria's voice broke. My insurance. There's a deductible and the hospital wants a deposit before they'll admit her properly. I've been sitting here for 6 hours trying to figure out what to do, and I'm scared, Mr. Caldwell. I'm so scared. I'm on my way, Richard said, already in the elevator. Which floor? Pediatrics, 4th floor. But Mr. Caldwell, I can't ask you to. You didn't ask. I'm coming. 20 minutes. Richard made it in 15, his driver breaking several traffic laws. He found Maria in a waiting room, still in her work scrubs, her face pale and streaked with tears. When she saw him, something in her expression crumpled the strong facade she had maintained for weeks, months, maybe years. She's so small in that bed, Maria whispered. And they keep asking about the deposit, and I have some savings, but not enough, and I can't work if I'm here with her. And, stop, Richard said gently, sitting beside her. Take a breath. Emma is going to be fine. The doctors here are excellent, and the money is taken care of. I can't let you... You're not letting me do anything. I'm choosing to help. There's a difference. Richard looked directly into her eyes. Maria, you helped me when I was stranded on a highway. You gave me your time, your gas money, your kindness, and you wouldn't accept anything in return. Now I'm doing the same. And like you told me, I'm not doing it for payment or gratitude. I'm doing it because it's right. Maria put her face in her hands and her shoulders shook. Richard sat quietly beside her, letting her cry, understanding that sometimes pride has to break before it can bend. When she finally looked up, her eyes were red, but clearer. Thank you, she whispered. I'll pay you back, however long it takes. We'll talk about that later. Right now, show me where Emma is. They walked down the hallway together. and Richard felt the eyes of staff members following them. The rich businessman in his expensive suit and the nursing assistant in scrubs. He didn't care. Emma's room was small but clean, and the little girl was indeed tiny in the hospital bed, an IV line in her arm, her dark hair spread across the pillow. But she was awake, and when she saw her mother, she smiled weakly. "Hi, Mama." "Hi, my love." Maria went to her side, kissing her forehead. "How are you feeling?" "My side hurts, but the nurse said the medicine will make it better." Emma's eyes moved to Richard, widening slightly. "You're the prince from the car." Despite everything, Richard smiled. "Just Richard. How are you, Emma?" "I'm okay. Are you friends with my mama?" "I am," Richard said, and realized it was true. A doctor entered, a young woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She explained Emma's condition in terms both Maria and Emma could understand. The infection was serious but treatable. 7 to 10 days of IV antibiotics, rest, and monitoring. Full recovery expected. "I'll have administration draw up the admission papers," the doctor said. Ms. Min Santos will need to discuss the financial arrangements." "That's been handled," Richard said quietly but firmly. "Send all bills to my office. I'll provide the information to the billing department." The doctor's eyebrows rose, but she nodded professionally. "Very well. Emma, you're in good hands. Try to rest." After the doctor left, Maria pulled Richard aside. "Mr. Caldwell, I can't even imagine what this will cost." "Maria, I'm going to be honest with you," Richard said. "The amount this hospitalization will cost is less than I spend on things I don't need in a month. Money I won't miss. But to you, it's everything. So let me do this, not as charity, but as what you taught me, helping because it's right." Tears filled Maria's eyes again. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to, but I do have one request." Maria nodded, waiting. "Let me help you more than this. Not with handouts, but with opportunities. I've learned a lot about how hospitals treat workers like you in the past 2 weeks, and it's not right. I want to change that, but I need people like you to help me understand what actually needs to change. Would you consider consulting on my new program?" "Paid consulting," he added quickly. "Your expertise is valuable." Maria looked at him for a long moment. "You really mean that?" "Every word." "Then, yes, if I can help make things better for people like me, I want to do that." They shook hands, and Richard felt that shift in his chest again, that sense that his life was moving in a direction he hadn't planned, but somehow needed. He stayed at the hospital until midnight, when Maria finally agreed to go home for a few hours of sleep while Emma rested. He promised to have his driver take her home and bring her back in the morning. As he watched her lean over Emma's bed, kissing her daughter good night, whispering words of love and comfort, Richard understood something profound. This woman, who society would label as struggling or disadvantaged, who worked 3 jobs and drove a car held together with wire, who couldn't afford a hospital deposit. She was richer than he had ever been, because she knew what mattered. She lived every day for something beyond herself. She turned her hardship into strength and her struggle into purpose. And Richard Caldwell, with his corner office and his penthouse and his luxury car, was the one who had been poor. Poor in spirit, poor in purpose, poor in the things that actually mattered. But maybe, he thought as he drove home through the quiet city streets, it wasn't too late to learn, wasn't too late to change, wasn't too late to become the kind of person who deserved the friendship of someone like Maria Santos, the kind of person who didn't just have wealth, but used it to create light in dark places, the kind of person who understood that true success wasn't measured in dollars but in lives touched, burdens lifted, and hope restored. Emma would recover, but Richard suspected he was the one being healed. Emma recovered, just as the doctors predicted. Within 10 days she was released from the hospital, weak but smiling, holding her mother's hand as they left. Richard had sent a car for them, and Maria had accepted it without protest, a small victory that felt significant. But Emma's hospitalization had been a turning point for more than just her health. Maria had agreed to join Richard's frontline worker support program as a consultant. What started as a few phone conversations turned into weekly meetings, then into something much larger. Maria brought 3 other nursing assistants with her to the second meeting, then 5 more to the third. They brought stories Richard needed to hear, Stories of mandatory overtime scheduled during custody weekends, forcing parents to choose between their jobs and seeing their children. Stories of split shifts that left workers with 2 hours of unpaid time in the middle. Not enough to go home. Too much to just wait. Stories of healthcare workers who couldn't afford healthcare for their own families. Richard listened, and then he acted. 6 months after their meeting on the highway, Maria Santos stood at the front of a conference room on the 42nd floor, presenting to Richard's entire executive team. She wore a simple but professional dress that Richard's assistant had helped her shop, for not a gift, Maria had insisted, but a loan for the presentation. Her hair was down, and though she had been nervous that morning, now she spoke with clear, confident authority. The changes Mr. Caldwell implemented 3 months ago have already made a significant difference, Maria said, clicking to the next slide. The flexible scheduling system allows workers to block out specific times for family needs. Child care subsidies mean single parents aren't spending half their income on daycare. The emergency fund has helped 12 families avoid eviction or utilities cutoff. Richard watched from his seat, feeling pride that had nothing to do with profit margins. Maria had transformed from a tired nursing assistant into an advocate, a voice for thousands of workers who had never had someone speak for them in rooms like this. But we need to go further, Maria continued. Healthcare workers are burning out at unprecedented rates. They're leaving the field, and hospitals are suffering. If we want quality care for patients, we need to take care of the caregivers first. She outlined a proposal she had developed with Richard's guidance, a comprehensive wellness program, expanded benefits, and a pathway for nursing assistants to advance to RN positions through company-sponsored education. When she finished, the room was silent for a moment. Then, Richard's CFO, a stern woman who rarely showed emotion, began to clap. The rest of the room joined in. After the meeting, Richard and Maria stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows looking out at the city. "You are brilliant," Richard said. Maria laughed, the sound more relaxed than he had ever heard. "I was terrified. It didn't show. Emma made me practice last night. She's a tough audience." Maria's smile softened. "She's doing well, by the way. Got an A on her science project. She wants to be a doctor when she grows up now. After seeing the doctors who helped her, she wants to help people too. She's like her mother." Maria looked at him, something shifting in her expression. "Mr. Caldwell, Richard, please. I think we're past formalities." "Richard," Maria said, testing the name, "I need to tell you something. When you first wanted to help us, I was angry. Not at you, but at the situation. I didn't want to be someone's charity case. I didn't want Emma to grow up thinking we needed rescuing. I know, but what you did, it wasn't charity. You didn't just give us money and walk away. You listened, you learned. You changed things not just for me, but for thousands of people like me. That's not charity, that's justice, and I'm grateful." Richard felt his throat tighten. "You changed me, Maria. That night on the highway when you refused my money and told me to pay it forward, that's when I realized how far I'd drifted from the person I wanted to be. I built a company, made a fortune, but I'd lost sight of why any of it mattered. And now I understand that success without purpose is just accumulation. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. What's the point if it doesn't make the world better?" Richard paused. "You and Emma, you gave me purpose again." Maria reached out and squeezed his hand, a gesture of friendship and understanding. "Emma wants to know if you'll come to her birthday party next month. It won't be fancy, just pizza and a cake in our new apartment, but she considers you family now." Richard felt something in his chest warm, unfamiliar, wonderful. "I would be honored." They stood together in the silence, two people from different worlds who had found common ground in the most unexpected way. Over the following months, Richard's company became known not just for its software, but for its values. Other companies began calling, asking about the Frontline Worker Support Program. Maria became a paid consultant, speaking at conferences, helping other organizations implement similar changes. She was able to quit her night cleaning job, then her weekend diner shifts, finally working just one job but making enough to support her family comfortably. Emma thrived in her new school, her natural intelligence blooming with proper support. She joined the gifted program, started taking piano lessons, and never stopped asking questions about everything. And once a week, Richard came to dinner at their modest but warm apartment, sitting at a second-hand table and eating Maria's home cooking, talking about everything from business to books to Emma's latest school project. His own children, watching their father's transformation from a distance, slowly began to reach out. His son called one day, asking about the worker program and admitting he wanted to do something meaningful with his inheritance. His daughter sent an email asking if they could talk, really talk, like they used to when she was young. Richard's life, which had been full of things but empty of meaning, began to fill with something more valuable than anything money could buy: connection, purpose, and love. But the real transformation wasn't in programs or policies or even relationships. It was in how Richard saw the world. Where he once saw transactions, he now saw human beings. Where he once saw numbers, he now saw stories. Where he once saw problems to solve with money, he now saw opportunities to make genuine change. And it had all started with a broken-down car and a woman who stopped to help, asking nothing in return. 2 years after their meeting on that dark highway, Richard Caldwell and Maria Santos stood together at another ribbon cutting. But this wasn't a corporate building or a hospital wing. This was something entirely different. The Santos Caldwell Foundation Worker Support Center occupied a renovated warehouse in Maria's old neighborhood. Inside were computer labs for job training, a child care facility with extended hours, a health clinic offering free services to uninsured workers, and counseling services for families facing financial hardship. Emma, now 10 years old and growing into a confident young girl, held the oversized scissors. Her mother's hand covered hers, and Richard's hand covered both. Together they cut the ribbon as dozens of people cheered: nursing assistants, home health aides, hospital workers, single parents, all the people the foundation was built to serve. "This is amazing," Emma whispered to her mother. "All these people are here because you and Mr. Richard helped them." "We just opened a door," Maria said. "They're walking through it themselves." Richard smiled at that. It was so perfectly Maria taking credit for nothing, seeing the strength in everyone else. The center had been Maria's idea, born from her experience. "Money helps," she had told Richard 6 months earlier, "but what people really need is opportunity and support. They need child care so they can work. They need job training so they can advance. They need health care so one illness doesn't destroy them financially. They need a place that understands their struggle because it's run by people who lived it." So Richard had provided the capital, but Maria had designed the program. She had hired staff, almost all of them former frontline workers themselves. She had created a culture of dignity, where asking for help wasn't shameful but smart, where struggling wasn't failure but courage. The foundation served 300 families in its first 6 months. Workers who had been barely surviving found pathways to stability. Single parents who worked multiple jobs found support that allowed them to work one good job instead. Children like Emma found tutoring, mentoring, and opportunities they would never have had otherwise. But perhaps more importantly, the foundation served as a model. Richard had made all their materials, processes, and programs open source. 12 cities had already replicated the center. Dozens more were in planning stages. After the ceremony, as evening fell and the crowd dispersed, Richard, Maria, and Emma sat on a bench outside the center, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and rose. "Do you remember that night?" Richard asked Maria. "On the highway," Maria laughed. "I remember thinking your car looked like it cost more than my entire life savings. I almost didn't stop." "I'm glad you did." "Me too." Maria looked at her daughter, who was drawing in a notebook, working on a story for her creative writing class. "Emma, Mr. Richard and I met because his car broke down and I gave him a ride. Did you know that?" Emma looked up, her dark eyes thoughtful. "I know. You tell that story a lot." "Do I?" "Yeah. You say it's about how one small choice can change everything. How helping someone isn't just about them. It changes you too." Emma said it with the simple clarity of a child repeating a lesson learned by heart. Maria and Richard exchanged glances, both smiling. "When did you get so wise?" Maria asked her daughter. "I learned from the best," Emma said, leaning against her mother's shoulder. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear. Richard thought about the man he had been 2 years ago, successful but hollow, wealthy but poor in the things that mattered. That man would have driven past a stranded car without a second thought. That man would have thrown money at a problem and called it solved. That man would never have imagined sitting on a bench outside a community center, feeling more fulfilled than any business deal had ever made him feel. "I've been thinking," Maria said, breaking the silence. "The foundation is doing well, but there's more we could do. What about a scholarship program for children of healthcare workers? Help them go to college? Break the cycle?" Richard pulled out his phone and opened his notes app. "Tell me more." As Maria outlined her vision, Richard typed, both of them planning and dreaming the way they had learned to do together. Her lived experience and his resources, her compassion and his connections, her wisdom and his willingness to learn. Emma, listening to their conversation, smiled to herself and went back to her drawing. She was sketching the community center, but in her child's imagination, it was a castle. And her mother and Mr. John, Richard, were the heroes of the story, the ones who helped everyone live happily ever after. She wasn't far wrong. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. Richard answered without looking at the caller ID. "Is this Richard Caldwell?" an unfamiliar voice asked. "Speaking." "Mr. Caldwell, my name is David Chen. My mother is Mrs. Beckett. Chen, she used to babysit for Maria Santos. She told me I should call you. My car just broke down on Highway 47, and I'm stranded with my 2 kids. I know this is probably strange, but Mom said you'd understand, and I have your number because of the foundation directory." And Richard was already standing, grabbing his coat. "What's your location, David?" 20 minutes later, Richard pulled his car, a much more modest sedan these days, onto the shoulder behind a disabled SUV. A young man in his 30s stood beside it, 2 small children peering out the back window. "Thank you for coming," David said, relieved and slightly embarrassed. "I called roadside assistance, but they said 2 hours and I have to pick up my wife from her nursing shift and—" "No explanation needed," Richard said. "Let's get you and the kids somewhere safe and we'll arrange a tow." As Richard helped buckle the children into his back seat, the little boy asked, "Mister, why are you helping us?" Richard thought about a cold November night, an old minivan, a tired woman who stopped when others didn't. "Because someone once helped me when I needed it," Richard said, "and she taught me that's what people do for each other." "Was she nice?" "She was the best person I've ever met." As Richard drove David and his children to safety, his phone buzzed. A text from Maria. Emma got her acceptance letter to Johns Hopkins. Full scholarship. She's going to be a doctor. Richard smiled, his heart full. He texted back, "Tell her congratulations from me. Dinner this weekend to celebrate? Your family, of course you're invited." Richard looked in his rearview mirror at the 2 children in his back seat, then at David beside him, and thought about the ripples a single act of kindness could create. Maria had stopped to help him. He had helped her and Emma. Together they had built a foundation that helped thousands, and those thousands were helping others, creating ripples that spread far beyond what any of them could see. This, Richard understood now, was the real measure of a life well lived, not the money in your bank account or the size of your office or the value of your possessions, but the number of lives you touched, the hope you created, the kindness you multiplied. It had taken a breakdown on a dark highway to teach him that, but he had learned, and he would spend the rest of his life paying forward what Maria Santos had given him that night, not just a ride, but a roadmap to becoming fully human. As the sun set behind them, Richard drove on, carrying his passengers toward home and safety, toward hope and second chances, toward a future where one person's compassion could light the way for countless others, because that's what people do for each other. And that's how the world changes, one small act of kindness at a time. This story teaches us that true wealth isn't measured in money, but in compassion, dignity, and the courage to help others without expecting anything in return. Maria Santos, working 3 jobs and struggling to survive, was richer than the Millionaire CEO because she understood what truly mattered: family, kindness, and living with purpose. Richard Caldwell learned that success without meaning is empty, and that the greatest privilege we have is the ability to lift others up. His transformation shows us that it's never too late to change, never too late to use our resources, whether money, time, or influence, to make a genuine difference in someone's life. The lesson is simple but profound. We rise by lifting others. When we help someone without expecting repayment, we create ripples of kindness that spread far beyond what we can see. Every person we encounter is fighting battles we know nothing about, and a simple act of compassion can change the course of their entire life. Maria's refusal to accept charity, and her insistence on maintaining her dignity reminds us that the greatest help we can offer isn't just financial. It's respect, opportunity, and the belief that every person has inherent worth and potential. This story is dedicated to every single parent working multiple jobs, every healthcare worker sacrificing for others, every person struggling in silence while maintaining their dignity and hope. You are seen. You are valued. You matter. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and share it with someone who needs encouragement today. Subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories that remind us of our shared humanity and the power of kindness. Most importantly, look for your own opportunity to help someone this week, not for recognition or reward, but simply because it's right. Remember, the best investment you'll ever make is in another person's hope. Thank you for watching, and may you be both blessed to receive kindness and inspired to give it freely.